Dairy Queen, Chapter 13 and 14. Chapter 13, Talk. Monday morning, I decided that if I was going to spend my life as a cow, at least I'd be in good company. Besides, I like cows. Every time I changed the milking machine, I rest my ear against the cow I was working on, listening to all that gurgling and think to myself, this isn't so bad. And every time I convinced myself a little bit more that it wasn't. And then, just as I was hooking up Tim Brown, named after a University of Notre Dame wide receiver, I heard a noise that didn't come from Tim's belly at all, and I looked up and almost jumped out of my skin, because there was Brian Nelson. "Geez," I croaked, "what are you doing here? Good to see you too." "Great beginning, DJ. You just spooked me a little." "I'm pretty spooky." I couldn't think of one thing to say. Tim Brown flicked her tail in my ear, just like a whip. I guess I've given her a little tug without realizing it. "I've changed my mind," Brian said finally, "about training." "Oh." He kicked at the barn floor. "I started thinking you were right about lifeguarding." "Oh," I said again. "Aren't you going to say anything?" I guess you should start with weights." "That's not what he sighed. "Okay." He picked up a curl bar. I kept my head against Tim Brown, trying to figure out what just happened. I sure didn't want to make a big deal out of it. It was Brian's decision after all. And I wasn't going to get gushy or anything. But boy, oh boy, once it started to sink in. "Brian, this'll be okay. Don't give yourself a heart attack or anything." But he smiled when he said it. After milking, Brian walked the cows out with me, tossed a smudge football to her, because she was giving herself a heart attack. She was so happy to see him. He sighed. "You know, there's one thing. It shouldn't bug me, but it does." "Uh-oh," I thought to myself, thinking of a million things he could name off. "It's just, I know it's some passive-aggressive thing, but the silent treatment thing really bums me out." "The passive what?" I had no idea what he was talking about. I guess when you're smart like Brian is and you get good grades, you're allowed to go around using words that no one understands. You know, I say something and it's not what you want to hear, so you wait and wait until I say the right thing. I had to stop walking. I was so surprised. "What?" "You do it all the time. Like just now when you said that I spooked you." I tried to make a joke, but you just waited and didn't say anything until I apologized. You think I did that on purpose?" "Yeah. I mean, who else just sits there walking, waiting like that? You think I'm waiting?" This was getting old, me repeating everything he said. "It's because I don't know what to say. Or I'm trying to figure out what to say, but at the time I get around to figuring it out, you're talking again." "Really?" Brian looked like he didn't believe me. "Yeah. I mean, you talk like I'm smart or something, but really, you know I'm not." That made him laugh. "I'm serious. So, when I say I hate weights and you don't say anything, you're really just trying to figure out how to tell me to shut up," he grinned. "That would be mean. I'm supposed to say encouraging things." "Yeah, and I'm not supposed to be a joke." "You're not a joke. Most of the time anyway," I grinned. "Huh. So how do you know when you're really mad at me?" I thought so long that Brian rolled his eyes. "I guess," I said finally, "I made you clean the barn floor." "I promise I won't make you mad," Brian said, so seriously that I cracked up. I so wanted to show Brian my new football field, but because Dad was still around, we had to paint instead, which Brian didn't seem too much to mind too much. Remarkably, he even went to work painting all that detailed work around the windows. He was still super slow, but at least he didn't drip paint all over the glass the way I would have. All of a sudden, Dad came thumping into the barn with his cane, starting us both. "How do you two feel about walnuts?" "Walnuts?" Dad asked. "Yeah, and brownies, like it was the most obvious thing in the world." It really doesn't matter, I said quickly, trying to get Dad out of there. He ignored me. So what do you think, Rob? Sure, I love walnuts, Brian managed. Dad sighed. I have to pick some up, and he tapped his way out. Brian looked so confused that I had to explain. He's got in a fight at church with some old lady, and so now he's trying to prove that my mom makes better brownies. Does she? No, she never makes them. So Dad's going to do it and say she did it because he doesn't want anyone to think a guy bakes. Brian laughed. That might be okay. Have you tasted my dad's cooking? Maybe he'll ask some of that Texas barbecue sauce, give them a little zip. We both laughed at that. When we went in for lunch, we were nearly knocked down by the thick, warm smell of chocolate. Oh my God, Brian moaned. Dad grinned like it was nothing. As soon as he brought the brownies to the table, though, you could tell there was a problem because he was serving them in bowls, which you don't normally encounter with that particular food, they oozed. Brian dug into his that so brown the guts dripped down his chin. These are great. What do you think? Dad asked sharply, seeing my face. They're good, it's just they're a little funny. Can I have another one? Brian asked. So Dad put the pan in the middle of the table, and all three of us went to work with spoons until the pan was empty and we looked like a bunch of dirty-faced kids. You know what I think? Brian frowned as he licked his fingers. This really has to be a scientific process. You need to test a bunch of recipes, find the best one. Dad nodded to himself. You know you're right. Oh, come on, I said. You're kidding. Brian scowled at me, and as stupid as I am, I finally figured out what he was getting at. Recipes don't just need test bakers, they need test eaters too. And if I had to spend the next week eating brownies with a spoon, well, that was a sacrifice I was willing to make for my father. Don't forget the walnuts, Brian said artfully. You really think so? Dad thought about it. I always felt walnuts are crucial to any baking project, Brian said, so seriously that I choked on my milk. Curtis finally showed up disappointed that we hadn't left him any brownies. That's what you get for sleeping at someone else's house until wherever it was he slept. The second he and Dad left, I raced for the heifer field. Come on, I have something to show you. Boy, you should have seen Brian's face. Bright green grass, 3 inches high, lines sharp as rulers, corner flags fluttering away, pretty as a postcard. Except for the yelling pooping right there on the 30-yard line. Norm, you moron, I yelled, get off the field. Of course Brian cracked up, which I guess he had every right to do because I was laughing too. And then he gave the heifers a long lecture on where they could poop and where they couldn't. It was the funniest thing I've ever seen. Brian standing there waving his finger like he was some kind of professor, and all the heifers eyeing him, flicking the flies off their ears like they were really paying attention, until they pooped. You cut that out, Norm, I shouted. You do that somewhere else. What's that cow's name? Brian asked. The heifer? Norm Van Brocklin. Who's that? The first Vikings coach back in the 60s. How about that one? Jerry Burns. I know him. He was a Viking coach too. Brian seemed pleased he knew that. That's what Dad wanted this year. Viking staff. Why he used coaches instead of football players? I shrugged like I didn't know the answer. I remember one year I showed a heifer named Leroy Jordan. You what? You know, the 4-H fair. You must go sometimes for the carnival rides. You show cows? Brian looked amazed. Well, duh. Look where we live. Leroy Jordan was some University of Alabama tackle from back in the 60s. These old farmers would pass by and see that name and light up. Remember the Orange Bowl? Remember that play? I heard more about that one game. And that was how our days went. We painted and worked out and trained in Rick Leach, Michigan, and Sidney Williams, Wisconsin, both calves. So we had little baby heifers to feed, which is more work, but they're so cute. It's worth it. Dad named them Max Winter and Bert Rose after the Vikings' first president and general manager from 1961, when Dad as a kid decided that a starter team that would need a player like him someday, which is how all the Swinks ended up not being Packers fans. Brian bought a whole bunch of those little rectangular flags from his dad's truck dealership and strung them around the field to keep the heifers off the grass, which made our football field look extra great. But mainly what I remember is talking. Eating brownies, lots of them, but mainly just talking. Being with Brian, it was like I was practicing something I've never known I needed, but I might need again sometime. So getting it down, figuring out how to talk, would probably be a good idea. Chapter 14, Talk Back. I say that's how the week went, but it was pretty and great in the beginning. But then things began to get a little intense. For one thing, Dad and the brownies, well, let's just say, I never knew baking powder was so important. And then there was the subject of Curtis. On Wednesday, Dad and Curtis had to go back to the dentist. Curtis had a cavity, even though he flosses every night, which I find kind of usual for a kid who's not all that big on personal hygiene. Dad was disgusted. It's microscopic for Pete's sake. He kept popping his teeth out to make the point, which was something I really wanted Brian to see. It's important, was all Curtis would say. Once they left, we went out to work on Brian's arm, again. As he passed me the football, he asked, how come Curtis never talks? He talks, I said. He talks to his friends, I think. You think? He's not retarded, I said defensively. Of course he's not retarded. I didn't say he was retarded. They keep testing him at school, but he's not. There's nothing wrong with him. Brian eyed me. Why do you think they're testing him then? Move your feet more, I said for the millionth time. We passed the football for a few minutes, not saying a word while I thought about all this. Never mind, Brian said finally. Forget I said anything. So what do you think is wrong? I asked. Nothing. I don't think it's anything. It's just my mother. Your mother thinks there's something wrong with Curtis? I couldn't believe it. She's with this group called Talk Back. She goes all over Wisconsin talking to church groups. Excuse me. Talk Back? That's really what it's called? You're supposed to walk into some church basement and say, I'm here to learn how to talk back. It was a little mean, I know, but it made me mad. The thought of Brian and his mom sitting around talking about how screwed up Curtis was, and the rest of us too, probably. It's a stupid name, I know. It's just to get families communicating and stuff. Does it work? Brian shrugged. I don't know. She's so busy helping families that she's never home. That's kind of funny, actually, that part of it. But he didn't look like he thought it was funny at all. And then there was this long, awkward silence. Is that how you know about that passive thing you called me? I had to ask. What passive-aggressive? Yeah, I guess so. That made me feel better, knowing there was a reason he knew fancy terms like that. He picked them up from his mother. So is your mom like Oprah Winfrey? I asked. Because that was the only person I could think of who would do stuff like trying to get families to talk to each other. Brian nodded. Yeah, in fact, my mom's Oprah Winfrey. She is not, I said. Oprah Winfrey doesn't live in Wisconsin. At that, we both cracked up. So is your mom ever on her show? I asked. Oh, all the time. They're like best friends, which made us laugh even more. Once that whole talk thing came out, though, I couldn't get it out of my mind. That image of Brian and his truck salesman dad and Oprah Winfrey sitting around the kitchen table, talking through family problems. Sheesh. That was hard enough, but it also seemed like Oprah Winfrey was rubbing off on us too in all our talk. Friday morning, as we were painting, Brian said, so your brothers are working at a football camp, right? I shrugged. What's with you? He waited, but I didn't say anything. Okay, is this one of your I'm waiting for you to say something, silence, or one of your I'm trying to figure out what to say, silences, or one of your I don't want to talk about it, silences? I don't want to talk about it. Okay, I just think you might want to talk about it. In our family, we talk all the time. About my brothers? I asked sarcastically. About problems. That's what you do in a family. You talk about things. And all that talk makes you happy? There was a bit of silence. Drop dead, he said. And we didn't say anything until lunchtime, when things kind of went back to normal. Jogging that afternoon, Brian asked what I was up to for the weekend, and I said nothing, which pretty much summed it up. And then just to be polite, I asked what he was doing. He sighed. Colleges. We already went out a couple of times, but I'm narrowing it down now. And I want to talk to coaches before the season starts. Silence. Why aren't you saying anything? What? It's great. You're looking at colleges. That's real important. Why? Aren't you thinking about that stuff? I had to laugh. But it wasn't one of those laughs like it was funny. It was one of the laughs like it wasn't A, we can't afford it. B, I'm only going to be a junior. And C, I didn't want to bring up C. What do you mean you can't afford it? Your brothers are going. Yeah, on football scholarships, which if you haven't noticed I can't get. There's basketball. You should be able to get something at least. Yeah, well, they don't like it too much when you miss your sophomore year because your dad won't get a stupid operation. And they also don't like too much those big fat F's on your transcript. It's funny, part of me didn't want Brian to know in a million years about my failing, but the other part felt it was really important to tell him. They understand about your dad. Wait, an F? You flunked the class? Brian was so surprised he stopped running. I kept walking, at least because I had to do something. Yup, sophomore English, I kicked the stone out of the road. But you're not. Come on. You mean I'm not a total idiot? That's not what I meant, though it kind of was. Me and Curtis, a couple of morons, wouldn't your mother have fun with us? Come on, stop it. What happened? I kicked another stone. Nothing. I was supposed to write these papers and I didn't, because I was so busy with the farm and I flunked. If you wrote the papers, couldn't they change it? The grades? They say they can, but I'm not writing them. So it really doesn't matter, does it? I'll write them if you want, he offered like it was the most casual thing in the world. I stopped and stared at him. What? You don't even know what they're about. It doesn't matter. You just sling it the right way. The words, I mean, he added. I know. It just knocked me out that Brian could just write a paper like that. Just sling it when the only thing I knew how to sling was cow poop. Maybe I was a moron. Hey, Brian offered. At least you don't have Jimmy Art telling everyone what a bum you are. And that cheered me up. It really did. It reminded me of how Jimmy sent Brian over in the first place, and how much Jimmy liked me and all of us shrinks, even though we don't talk much and can't write about Shakespeare. At that moment, what I really wanted was for Brian to put his arm around my shoulders the way they do in TV ads. But that pretty clearly wasn't going to happen, so instead, I punched him right there at the bottom of his deltoid where it felt nice and solid. And the smut came tearing down the road to see us, and Brian left for the day, for his big senior year, college trip, while I stayed on the farm doing nothing. I kind of figured that once he left my brain, would go back to where I am, the cow business, and sure enough it did. It looked right away at dinner. It started right away at dinner when I noticed how tired Mom looked. Now that I thought about it, she was a cow too, just as much as me or the cook or the checkout ladies at the supermarket. She didn't want that extra job, but when they asked her to do it, she took it without even thinking she could say no. She walked right into that milking stall of a principal's office. That made me really depressed as the thought of me as a cow. I guess because it didn't give me much to look forward to. It's one thing thinking that you're a cow when you're a teenager or a farmer or a checkout lady. But Mom had a real job with a real office, at least until they hired a permanent principal in a real classroom she taught in, and her life sounded even worse than mine. She had all that time to find something to do with her life, and this is what she ended up with. See, so you can see how cheery I was. Then in bed, I started thinking about Gwen and Bill and their lives, what I knew about them. Anyway, it sounds stupid at first, but when you think about it, football players don't have it much better. They do what you tell them to do. They stand where you tell them to stand, and the whole point of it is to produce something for other people. No one plays football just because they love the game. I mean, they do love it, but anyone could do that, even guys who stink. Football players play so people can watch them and get excited and buy tickets and clothing and stuff, so people will have something to talk about on Monday mornings. And it's not like football players get treated any better than cows do. Sure, they get doctors just like cows get vets, but when they're old and hurt like my dad is, there's not some big old wallet of money from people saying, "Thank you for feeding us all that excitement and tickets and stuff to watch on TV." Last year, Bill was friends with a tackle who tore up his knee, and they kicked him right out of college. He couldn't feed them anything anymore. That's not the same as leading a cow into a cattle dealer's truck. I don't know what is. Then I started thinking that maybe everyone in the whole world was just like a cow, and we all go along doing what we're supposed to without complaining or even really noticing until we die. Stocking groceries and selling cars and teaching school and cashing checks and raising kids, all these jobs that people just one day start doing without even really thinking about it. Walking right into the milking stall the way the heifers do after they've had their first calf and start getting milk for the first time until we die. And maybe that's all there is to life. And that's what I thought about all night long. All the stuff you never hear on Oprah Winfrey, which you can understand because if I got on a show and started talking, everyone in the audience would probably kill themselves.